Or like you not going to the gym helped Alfredo out.
Oh, I know. We're not talking
I
about
know,
that right
but
now.
I just had to try to bring it up real quick. That shit was funny. He was telling me, he was like, bro, Richard's lazy ass was like, oh, I need to do homework. But it actually helped me out because I
I
got to
was seeing the future.
I was like, this motherfucker.
Anyway, welcome. My name is Richard. This
My
is
name
the
is.
Saudi Arabian review.
You know, let me introduce myself.
I introduce yourself.
My name is Nathan.
So this week, so that's Nathan, Nathaniel.
Nathan.
So, leading up to the race, what do you remember?
I remember being excited. I remember we went to go get food and we were almost late for the race.
Oh, yeah, we went to get food right before. Well, so coming into the weekend, everyone was expecting Ferrari to pick up the pace and
do better.
and at least be closer to Red Bull. Aston Martin was still expected to be battling with Mercedes. For the most part, McLaren was still, we didn't know where they were going to be because they did really bad their first race, but
Dog shit.
yeah, and then that was partially reliability and then like them being slow as fuck. So we didn't know about McLaren. Everyone else seemed pretty reasonable.
Same,
Yeah,
for
the
the
same.
most part.
Verstappen-
AlphaTauri. I will get into that.
Yeah. Verstappen looked like he was gonna probably dominate another
Race.
I was predicting that Perez would win, get pole, and hopefully hold off Verstappen, which
My predictions were wrong.
way off.
Okay, I remember saying both Red Bulls on podiums. I'm pretty sure. I just didn't know who would be where. And then I said Leclerc would probably get like a podium or something. He probably could have if he didn't have the penalty, honestly.
No, I don't think so. We'll get into that. So practice sessions, it becomes pretty apparent that Ferrari's off the pace. But they keep telling everyone, no, we're going to be good in qualifying the race. Don't worry about it, guys. We'll be there. Alonso is also looking really fast, and the Mercedes are nowhere, even behind some of the midfield teams like AlphaTauri and, well, I can't call Aston Martin a midfield team. They're front runners now. So that's looking pretty bad. And then that's leading up into the race. Perez is looking pretty fast as well. We get into qualifying. And the first thing I have written here is track limits and Logan Sargent. Because he set a really fast lap, getting him into the top 10 in qualifying, going way faster than Albon.
Didn't have him like first?
No, he was like fifth or something. But even then, like that is still really impressive. So he crossed the white line coming up to the finish line.
That like pink tarmac type shit.
Yeah, so essentially there's a straight line to the finish line. And there's a small section where there's the border of the track comes out a little bit for the pit lane. And basically they don't want you to cross that because it's technically gaining an advantage. And they told all the drivers before the race that if you touch that line, like your lap will get canceled. So they knew going into qualifying and the race that they cannot touch that. Mm-hmm. Maybe touch the line, but they couldn't touch the purple that the rest of the tarmac was painted. So that was very clear to them. And so he has this perfect lap. Like, even if he didn't touch it, it would have been in the same spot. But he, like, barely went over it. And then his lap got deleted. And he couldn't do another lap. His second lap that he went on, he spun. And that let everyone else not make a lap anyway. So, that sucks for him because he did really good. And I think he's a really good driver. And he's really fast. But he was really upset. And this is where you see the immaturity come in. Because he set a fast lap, so he's fast. But then he was upset about the penalty and couldn't stop arguing about it over the radio. And then he couldn't set a straight lap afterward. I know I mentioned he spun out, but he did another lap too, and he messed up that one as well. So he had multiple chances to keep going, but he kept messing up.
He needs that character development.
Yes.
But honestly, I think he's fast. Like, he's pretty solid. Of the who's three new ones?
We have
De
Vries, which I mean I don't know if I call him a rookie, but rookie to Formula One.
But then again, he's in an AlphaTauri, so it's like
we got Sargent, and then we have Piastri.
I think Sargent's doing best out of all three so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that was pretty upsetting. The rest of Q1, I was half asleep, so I don't really remember.
Q1.
You don't have anything else?
Honestly, I don't remember Q1. That's because I know for the most part, at least, like,
Who was where?
who will, like, make it at least.
Yeah, so coming out of Q1, Logan Sargent didn't really get his lap. Now, his official lap is way slower. In Formula 1, there's a rule called the 107% rule, where they take the fastest lap and then they multiply it by 107%. And if you're slower than that time, you did not qualify. So you weren't fast enough to make it into the race. And this is to prevent like small teams from getting into Formula 1, not being fast enough and still being allowed to race.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some level of expectation to make it into Formula 1. His official lap time fell way behind that, but they were given a pass as clearly he could set a time faster than that. It was a one-off situation.
Yeah.
But he was 20th. 19th was Norris. 18th was Nick DeFries. 17th was Alex Albon. 16th was Yuki Tsunoda, which I think for me, it's not surprising. I predicted AlphaTauri was going to be pretty slow. Same with McLaren. So this is kind of where I expected them to be, but to give benefit of the doubt, I think Logan Sargent should have been way higher than where he is.
Yeah.
And Yuki Tsunoda, like Alex Albon, he has to be doing better.
Mm-hmm.
To be
Did
honest,
he mess up this qualify? I don't think he did.
I don't think he was just slow the whole weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and we couldn't really. Well, we'll talk about that in the race. But so that was Q1. Q2 is where things get pretty interesting. Max Verstappen pretty early on has a drive shaft failure. I have a prediction of why, but I'll talk about that later because it comes back into the race as well. He was on his qualifying lap. It looks like the gearbox. I don't know if the gearbox failed, but for some reason the engines went really high revs, and the drive shaft couldn't handle it and broke that way, and put him out for the rest of the session. He was able to get back to the pits, but that was pretty much it for him. So he was starting 15th from the get-go. I don't remember anything else. Pretty much. Oscar Piastri made it into Q1.
Q2. Or Q1, yeah.
No, Q3.
Q3.
The last, yeah.
I'm like,
I was
half asleep right now.
So that was pretty interesting. Judging by his teammate finishing 19th. So I wonder if Lando had a problem or Piastri is just much faster. Because even in Q1, his lap time was 0.7 faster than Norris, which is, you shouldn't be beating your teammate by 0.7.
Mm-hmm.
Or you shouldn't be losing to your teammate by 0.7.
He had to have had a problem then.
I don't know. I mean, I would say he was the biggest outlier besides Verstappen. I feel like for where the cars should be performing, Piastri probably should have been 15th. Everyone else that was eliminated from Q2 was pretty normal, I would say. The two Haas's and the two Alfa Romeos going Nico Hülkenberg, Zhou, Magnussen, and Bottas, and then you have Verstappen, who didn't really set a lap time, which is weird. The reason I say weird, because I'd expect Bottas to be at the top of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe he just doesn't like the course, but he wasn't very fast all weekend. And, I mean, we'll get into the race as well, but yeah, he didn't have pace there either. Then we get to Q1, where nothing really notable happened. Charles Leclerc did have a penalty coming into this race for 10 place grid penalty. So wherever he finishes at 10, that's where he's going to start. So that kind of dictates what happens next. Perez gets pole by 0.2, which is not a big margin, but I think he probably could have gone faster. He just held himself back a little bit. He didn't do his final lap, so who knows if he really went all out. Second was Leclerc, which is important. That means he will be starting 12th for the race.
Mm-hmm.
Then right behind him was Alonso, then Russell, then Sainz, Stroll, Ocon, then Hamilton, Piastri, and Gasly. Which Hamilton, he had been talking about it all week that he just did not feel comfortable with the car. He kept talking about setup was wrong and George Russell had a better setup, but I don't know. He could just be trying to limit damage to his reputation. I could be wrong too, so who knows? But he was definitely not comfortable with that car. And then, well, Alonso, they're doing like most people expected. Alonso was doing pretty good. Ferrari, they look competitive at this point, but we know Leclerc is going to be
in the back
with Verstappen.
Mm-hmm. Sainz, I feel like
Sainz was almost 0.6 off of Perez, which in qualifying could be okay, but for the race, if he's 0.6 off a lap, 50 laps, that's what, 30 seconds by the end. So he's still, I don't think he's not performing very well for whatever reason.
Pain.
Yeah, so that was qualifying. Alonso starting second because Leclerc has that penalty. So then we get into the race.
Yeah, because everyone moved up one, right?
Yeah.
Well, at least Gasly did better this time. He actually made it to Q3.
Did he?
Yeah,
yeah, he did.
Yeah,
he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. Alpine looking a lot better from last race, at least in qualifying.
Mm-hmm.
I think the pace, they have the pace. It's just a matter of, I don't know what happened about Bahrain. That could just be a one-off, but I think they are solid midfield, which they should be ahead, but whatever. Now we get into the race. Would you like to start it off?
The race. I remember lights out and away we go. We didn't watch that commentator, did we?
No, we watched the pit lane commentary, so it's not Crofty.
Mm-hmm.
It's the other guys who I find much better and are much more informative. But people have their preference, so it's up to you who you decide to watch.
Yeah, when it first started off, I remember, did Perez got a decent start?
He kind of had an okay start, but Alonso had a really good start. Yeah. So they went side by side into turn one. But because the first turn to left turn, Alonso had the advantage going inside. So Perez just decided not to fight it. He knows he has the pace ahead of the Aston Martin, so there's no reason to go against them.
Yeah.
So
he'd pass him eventually.
You knew he would pass him eventually, so there's no need to fight. Right, at least right at the beginning. I was predicting there would be mayhem at the start, but guess not. So they kept going. They.
Yeah, I was expecting man, the way you were talking about it, sure, some.
Well, I have my opinions about this track, and I think it still is really dangerous. And I don't know if you agreed with me, but it looks really cool. But
yeah,
the way that the turns are shaped, if someone crashes ahead of you, you don't have enough time. And there's not enough runoff to really avoid what's happening ahead of you. Mm-hmm. Which thankfully, almost no one hit each other. Because right at the start, Piastri runs into the back of somebody. I think it's
who's in front of him?
I think it's Gasly he runs into, or Ocon, one of the Alpines. Mm. They touch his front wing. That gives him front wing damage.
He has to flying back. And it hit Norris, I'm pretty sure. I saw a video on it, that's why.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty funny.
So, now we can't judge McLaren's pace at all because he just got fucked right at the beginning anyway. So, thank you for that pointless qualifying. Anyway, so after that, like we expect, Perez gets around Alonso, but at the same time, we're getting an investigation for Alonso for being out of place at the start of the Grand Prix.
The same thing that happened to Ocon in the.
Yes, which is the same thing that happened to Ocon, which essentially, so he's lined up in the same spot, so he's not any closer to Perez, but he's outside of the lines,
To the
the
left.
white lines, to the left, or I think Ocon was to the right.
Mm.
And you've seen this in the past, very exaggerated. One year, I think, what's his name? Sebastian Vettel was like halfway out of his pit box to get a better start going into turn one, so he can be closer. So that type of like that will can give you an advantage, but people are saying that it's kind of harsh. I don't think it's harsh. They have to follow these rules, and people are saying like FIA is inconsistent. Well, people didn't like the new people they got last year, even though they were more consistent, because they're being too harsh. Now they have newer people that are even following the rules even more by the book, and people are being upset, even though they're not giving anyone preference.
They're being consistent.
They're being consistent,
Which is what people wanted, but now they're mad that they are
Consistent.
being consistent.
because it's not helping their favorite driver. That's probably why.
That's true.
So he ends up getting a 5-second penalty for that. And this happens right around the same time when Perez passes him. But he knows Perez is way faster because they both take off from the field. By the time he passes him, they're both like 6 seconds clear from, I think it's Sainz.
No, Russell. Because Russell was still ahead of Sainz. Oh, wait, no. I'm looking at the fucking results.
Yeah. I'm almost, it was whoever was in third place, they were at least 6 seconds ahead. And now Alonso probably could have kept pushing, but he knows that he can't really fight him because they're going to get past anyway. So on the front straight, Perez gets on the inside, locks up, kind of goes deep, but Alonso doesn't really fight it. He gets a better exit, but again, he kind of lets Perez does his own thing. And then Perez starts extending his lead. At this point, you see Leclerc and Verstappen slowly making up. I think by lap 10, they're both in the top 10 already.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, we got to start taking notes. But by that time, they're already in the top 10. And it was, where is it? Stroll on lap 16. So this is another 5 or 6 laps after Perez gets around Alonso. Lance Stroll has an engine problem, and he's going really slow, and he pulls off to the side of the track, and he actually makes a U-turn, so he gets parked behind the wall because the walls are kind of, when they open up, it's... When the walls open up, they're shaped in a way where if a car crashes straight off the road, they're not going to leave the track. But cars can still access the track with vehicles or tractors, whatever they need. So he sees that and he makes a U-turn at a point where there's a lot of runoff area. And he gets fully behind the wall. Like, all they have to do is push the car forward a little bit more and he's completely behind the wall. And they call it a safety car. Not even a virtual safety car, a full safety car. For what? I mean, actually, I have an idea now. Because at this point, the field's kind of spread out. Because you've had people pit already, so everyone's kind of all over the place. There may have been debris from Piastri's car that was in the middle of the road somewhere, and they want to grab that. But the only way they can do that is if they bunch everyone up.
And that's the safety car.
That's the only justification I could find for them having a safety car. Any other, like, if it was because his car was in a dangerous spot, it's bullshit and they're lying. So, but it doesn't, I mean, it helps Leclerc and Verstappen. Actually, no, it doesn't help Leclerc. Leclerc pits before.
Both Ferraris had pitted, I'm pretty sure, before the safety car.
So what happens during the safety car, if you pit before it, everyone else has an opportunity to pit and get away with it because everyone has to slow down their speed.
And there's no passing, right? Or
there's no passing. So if you pit, I think you gain something like 9 seconds. And at this point, Verstappen was ahead of the Ferraris. And before they pit, he wasn't that far behind them either. So he gets to pit and he jumps like 3 or 4 cars. He ends up 4th for the restart, jumping from 8th or 7th to 4th. And because it's a restart and they're all bunched up, he now has a really good fighting chance for the win. All that's ahead of him is, I think, Russell and Alonso. But now they can actually fight him for their position because, I mean, they're both considered a top team. Why wouldn't you fight for a podium? So the restart happens, and the opposite of what I predicted happened. So Russell and Alonso didn't even fight for their penalty because don't know why. Probably they knew that like Russell's going to try and get Alonso, so he knows that I can't fight Verstappen. Let him get by me. I'll get the DRS off of him, and I'll try and get in as soon as possible. Then Alonso, same thing. I don't need to fight Verstappen. Let him take care of Perez. Maybe I can get something if they crash into each other or something happens between them.
Like the podium is pretty much enough for him. Like
so this is I'm almost positive he gets around him by like lap 25. Yeah, lap 25 because there's an interview with Verstappen right before the race where Alonso said he would be second by lap 25. And on lap 25, he passed Alonso for second. So now there's 25 laps remaining. There's 6 seconds in between Perez and Verstappen. For 25 laps, that's how much the gap is. And Perez, who's always been kind of slower than Verstappen, and I agree that he is slower, has to keep that 6-second gap, or at least go fast enough where he doesn't close off, or if he gets up close to him, defend from Verstappen. So at this point, for me, the race is really tense. Now it's a game of tire management and strategy and lap times. For the whole rest of the race, you keep seeing Verstappen and Perez switch off for fastest lap because they're pushing as hard as they can to keep either one behind or catch up. For the first 5 laps, you see Verstappen take a 10th or 2 out of Perez's lead. And he gets down to 5 seconds, and that's where it stays. On lap 27, Alex Albon has brake failure. It looks like it's an intermittent issue because he was still able to slow down the car for the turns, but he's letting everyone go behind him. But he was still able to use his brakes sometimes. So what people, or the speculation is that it's an electronic issue because the rear brakes are controlled electronically. It's not by... So when you press your brake in your road car, you're controlling a piston that has pressure in it. So when you stomp on your pedal really hard, you'll feel more resistance the more you go down because there's a pressure from a piston that pushes against fluid. That's where you need brake fluid from. That uses that pressure to push the pistons that close the brake pads onto your brake rotor, which slows your car down using thermal energy to transfer heat into the brakes. That slows you down with friction as well. F1 cars, you still brake the same way by your brake pads on a disc that causes friction, which slows you down. But there's no direct link between the actual brake pedal and that system. It's all controlled electronically. They're thinking they may have had a fault on that brake pedal. So sometimes it would work the way it's supposed to, sometimes it doesn't. So he decides to do another lap, then realizes it's not going to work again, goes a really slow lap, makes it back to the pits, and it's fine. No safety car, nothing.
I remember him like not being able to brake really, but I don't remember him like actually going out of the race.
Yeah, I mean he goes into the pits and then they just stop the car, bring it in. Nothing really crazy. I mean, he was in a pretty big midfield battle. This is between Kevin Magnussen, Yuki Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, Guan Yu Zhou, Nick DeVries, Piastri, Logan Sargent, and Norris. They're all fighting for pretty much 11th to 16th. They're all pretty, 18th maybe, because that's with him there.
But they were all pretty bunched up. Like
Yeah, they're all pretty close and running similar pace, but yeah, that's kind of where they're at. So the big important battles at this point that we see is the battle for 10th with Kevin Magnussen, Yuki Tsunoda. Kevin makes multiple moves for 10th spot, doesn't make it work, and with 5 laps to go, finally gets around Yuki Tsunoda, and he doesn't look back, stays there for the rest of the race. You have Leclerc behind Sainz. Now, a lot of people were saying they should have called team orders because Leclerc was faster, but if you really look at it, he never got close enough where he can really tell Sainz to let go. I think the closest he got was, 2 seconds?
Like 2 seconds. He never even got, like, within DRS range. So.
Yeah. So 2 seconds is a lot of time for Sainz to give up and get back on the pace just for Leclerc to maybe be faster. So for all the people saying that Leclerc or Sainz should have given up the position.
But then again, Leclerc, too, was on softs at the beginning of the race, too, right? Like,
I think he should have been on... No, they're all on hards at this point. Because it's a one-stop race. Maybe some people made 2 stops. I don't think so. Everyone else is... Hamilton's not catching Russell. I mean, he's kind of close, but not really. Russell is kind of close to Alonso, but they're all keeping pace. Now, what is interesting, which we would find out after the race, at this point, Alonso is being investigated for the same penalty that Ocon was penalized before the race, or last race, for being out of position at the grid or at the start of the race. So I'm assuming Mercedes called the FI, was like, hey, like, we think this is a penalty. So towards the end of the race, you see Russell and Hamilton try and get closer to Alonso, and Alonso's trying to extend the gap for 5 seconds, which is what
the penalty was. 5.
No, he's being investigated for not serving his pit correctly, which is also what's his name? Ocon got. And he got 5 seconds. And now they're looking at Alonso for the same infringement. So by the end of the race, you see Alonso stay ahead of that 5 seconds. So even if he gets penalized, he will keep 3rd place. Verstappen is still trying to get past Sergio Perez, but he's staying at that 5 seconds. And every time they try and keep every time Verstappen gets a little bit ahead, Perez extends that lead a little bit ahead. So with 10 laps to go, they asked both of their drivers to slow down by a whole second for whatever reason, maybe to keep them in place, which actually that's interesting. They told both of them to do the same lap times, which means they're calling team orders, which means they didn't want them to fight.
I mean, yeah, like you're in a comfortable 1-2 position. Like, why are you going to have your...
But immediately, both of them don't follow that and continue going as fast as they can.
Because obviously Sergio doesn't want Verstappen catching up and taking his win. And then...
So now on the broadcast, they only played Perez's radio, so it looked like they were telling him to slow down, which is not true. They also told Verstappen, but they just didn't play it. Don't know why. But with a couple laps to go, Verstappen starts to slow down. And we think we might have an issue, but no, he's saving up his ERS. So at the last lap, he does the fastest lap, takes that 1 extra point. So he's the leader of the championship by 1 point ahead of Sergio Perez. Perez wins. He's all happy. Now, halfway through the race, this is...
Scare the shit out of me.
So halfway through the race, we start hearing Verstappen complain about his drive shaft issue again. The same thing he had in qualifying. And a little bit later, we have Perez complaining about his brake pedal being long. That means when he presses the brake pedal, now this is also interesting. To simulate that brake pedal resistance, they also have, maybe he only controls I'm not too sure, but his brake pedal is getting long. So that means he's having to put the amount of pressure that he normally puts is going longer. So it's going more in. So that could either mean brake failure, brake fade, which is brakes are overheating, or brake wear. If his brakes are overheating, that means he has to put more pressure, and the brakes are just, because they're so hot, it's just melting away the pad.
Mm.
Brake wear, I mean, your brake pads, normal ones, are like about this thick. The more you drive it, the more and more they shave down. And the more you do have to press the brake pedal in your normal road car, but it's not that noticeable where it affects your braking. So he tells the team that he's having a long brake pedal, so he has to press more into the brake. But they tell him it's just brake wear, so his stopping power will be the same. He just has to press the brake a little bit more. So he's fine. And I actually think the reason why this is happening, and the reason why Verstappen had his brake or his drive shaft brake, there's different styles of braking. You could rely more on the engine to brake, so you're putting more stress on the gearbox by shifting down faster.
Mm-hmm.
And what that causes your front wing to pitch more into the corner, so you have more oversteer. That's what Verstappen that's how his driving style is. Perez likes more understeer. So understeer, you're not as hard on you're not shifting down as fast. So your car isn't tending towards to get into the front nose isn't pointing more towards into the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have to use a little bit more of your tires. But there's a way to combat this if you're really good on the brakes. There's something called brake trailing. So normally when you're taught racing or how to drive fast, you immediately learn don't brake and turn. Because if you brake and turn, your front wheels are going to get locked up and you go straight. But if you're really careful about it, you'll get really hard on the brakes and you slowly start lifting off, but you start turning as well. So you're still on the brake, but you're turning, which normally is a big no-no. But in this case, it actually helps the car turn more into the corner. So that way you're using less of your actual tires and it saves your tires. You can still be really fast and have the right amount of, pitch into the corner.
Mm.
And you're not putting stress onto your gearbox and drive shaft. Because Verstappen's complaining about his drive shaft, Perez is complaining about his brakes. And I think this is where their driving styles
can be seen.
And this can go a long way, because if Red Bull has an intermittent or unreliable drive shaft or gearbox, you might see Verstappen have this problem more and more. And if he tries to change his driving style to the way that Perez drives his car, you're going to see him be slower because he's not used to that driving style.
And Perez is, so that means more Perez.
Yes. So this is a really important, we'll see in Australia, but this can really change how this championship goes. And it's not that Perez will be faster, but if
he will have an advantage.
He will have an advantage if Verstappen keeps breaking his car and getting penalties for it later on in the year. Now, he can break, I think, however many drive shafts, but eventually his gearbox is going to get worn out. So that's pretty interesting to me, because immediately when I heard them both complain on the radio, I'm like, that's probably why that's happening. Perez is using more of his brakes to slow down the car. And this can really play out how the future championship goes. But as of now, Verstappen's the leader. Perez is second in the championship. Third is Alonso. Fourth is Carlos Sainz. And fifth is Lewis Hamilton. So at least Sainz is still fourth. And eventually, Alonso is penalized 10 seconds, which is excessive because the rear jackman touched his car, which, okay, but if it was 5 seconds, it's understandable. But 10, that's where the inconsistency comes in. But then Aston Martin, because they have the right to review, so if there's a penalty, each team can look at that penalty and say, did this happen? Yes or no?
Like a challenge, kind of.
They have a chance to appeal it before it's official, and they do, and they show. I think it was they presented the FIA 11 other times or 9 other times that teams did the same thing they did and there was no penalty. So they take away the penalty. Alonso keeps his podium for like 30 minutes. Russell was third, but that didn't last very long. And now the FOA is going to change the rules so it's more clear of what they can and cannot do. This is how usually most rules are written. A team finds a gray area. They exploit that area. A rule change gets put into place because of that exploitation. So, yeah, what were your thoughts about the race?
As a Ferrari fan, it's a little bit depressing, especially because, like, oh, yeah, they pit. Oh, yeah, safety car, like, damn near the next lap. And I was like, bro, are you serious? Like, we just pitted. And then that let Verstappen just, like, he pretty much got ahead of both Ferraris and the Red Bull, or the Mercedes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was already ahead of Hamilton at that point, I think.
He just got past Leclerc.
Mm-hmm. So he was between Leclerc and Sainz?
Yeah. And then Sainz pit. But then the safety car came out. Then he jumped Sainz and Hamilton, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So he only jumped up 2 spots. But that still was a big advantage for the restart.
So it was a little bit depressing, They were stuck back in 5th and 6th. And then before all the talks were like, oh, yeah, like we're going to have all this. Like, we'll be better pretty much like the second race.
Well, I think it's more the fact. So there's having the fastest car and then there's having the fastest race car. I think they still have the second fastest car.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe Leclerc could have gone past Sainz at the beginning, but they both ended up slowing down later on in the race because of the wear on their tires that the car behaves.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a chance at fighting Alonso and the Mercedes at the end, which is cool to see. Which essentially means for the rest of the year, or if they can fix this issue, you might see. So take the next race at Australia, you'll see the Ferraris, the Red Bulls, and then maybe Alonso and the Ferraris, then the Mercedes with Stroll. But later in the race, it'll turn into the Red Bulls, Alonso, Ferraris, Mercedes, and Stroll all together. Because they can't keep the pace the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Unless, if I still think they have a chance of like winning a race this year, just on pace, but it has to be. They got to get lucky.
Good strategy too.
Which I think the strategy was fine. They just called it at the wrong moment.
Like so far, they've been doing like things
fine.
I think it was just like they were just unlucky this race too.
Yeah, and I think every team makes mistakes, even Red Bull and Mercedes. But because Ferrari's been known to make these mistakes all the time, they're put even more underneath a microscope. So every single decision that they make is seen as like, oh, they're fucking up. They're making Ferrari worse, which I don't think that's the case. It's just, yeah, like,
it's like, bro, they made a mistake.
All right, what would you rate this race out of 10? 5 being
we said
average.
5 being the average, right? What I give the last race? I think I gave it like a 7. I give this one like. What was that?
It's a bot.
All right. Then why'd you follow her?
I didn't.
Uh-huh.
I did not.
I give it like a 6. I think I enjoyed the first race. Then again, it was like the first race because like being hype. Yeah, it was okay.
I'll rate this a 1,000 out of 10. No, okay. To me, this race is a 7 out of 10 because Perez won, and also because the first couple races have been like average Formula One races, which compared to last year seems boring as fuck. So all the fake F1 fans are gonna be turned off. Then all that's gonna be left are the real fans, and then all I have left to talk to are people that actually care about the sport. This is why it's exciting to me. But I thought it was solid for the most part. Like it was like
I personally like the track. Like, yeah, if they like made it safer or whatever. I don't know how they would do that. But
Well, the reason why they're getting around it, so this is my topic about Saudi Arabia. They're getting around the fact that, like, getting around these safety rules that a normal racetrack would have to do for a race. They're getting around it because they're calling it a street track, even though the whole entire thing is purpose built for Formula One, and they don't actually have cars that run on it, but they call it a street track.
it pretty much looks like a racetrack.
Yeah, but it is a racetrack. So the safety standards that are needed for a normal F1 race are much lower. Well, not lower, but the requirements for like spacing between the track and the walls is significantly lower. Now, I'm okay with this at some venues. Like take Miami, for example. I'm okay with it because almost the majority of the racetrack is wide open.
Mm-hmm.
They have runoff, plenty of runoff area. That one is literally almost a purpose-built racetrack. But the thing that takes the fun out of those street tracks, it's all flat, so there's no elevation. It's kind of boring for the drivers. So that's another example.
You said something about the walls too.
Yeah. So I remember I told you about the walls. They do have them. I just didn't notice them before. So what I'm talking about is safer barrier, which is created by IndyCar and NASCAR, and now Formula One uses it. So it's a secondary wall that's put in front of the concrete walls. So they're a lot softer, and that secondary wall has almost like foam in between it, a cushion. So when you hit that wall, the whole thing what's it called? Compresses. So it dissipates a lot of the energy that normally you would hit with the concrete wall. So it's not as harsh on the drivers, and it's much safer. So they do have that, which is cool to see, and that's nice, I guess. But still, like the fact that like the whole thing is purpose built, but they're calling it a street track, it's kind of stupid in my opinion. Like at least Baku, majority of that racetrack is actual street. So like there's a reason why they can only be this big.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna make an actual racetrack but call it a street track, you should be forced to have the same regulations for
A racetrack.
for a normal racetrack. Have it wide open. If somebody spins and crashes, it's okay. Even Australia, which is where we're going to next, is a street track. And this was built back in 1996. And it's way better than Saudi Arabia. So this is disappointing for multiple reasons. That's my take on Saudi Arabia.
There's a race this weekend?
Next weekend. That will be a good race. It's a lot faster now. I don't think it will be more dangerous than it is before.
Oh, I'll be here for the race. Oh, but we're gonna go to the thing, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going. Oh, the Sunday. I'm still gonna wake up early, watch the race. I don't care.
I'm watching qualifying at.
Oh, it's at 10 at night.
Oh.
That's fine. We're good.
Wait, so then qualifying's also at night, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be back by qualifying.
We'll be fine. It's 10 o'clock at night on the Saturday. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So other notes I have is Red Bull favoritism. Now I know I mentioned that they called team orders during the race and like basically saying
Slow down.
like both of them to slow down and kind of keep their position, but both didn't follow that. Verstappen ended up going for a fastest lap, and Perez is upset with the team because they didn't tell him that he was doing that. And if they told him, Perez would have slowed down as well, and they both would have gone for a fastest lap, which also would have been, I think, pretty cool to see who is just fastest outright. But that didn't happen, and he didn't get the lead of the championship, so Perez is kind of pissed off about that. But I think for the most part, he's pretty happy with the team, so I'm sure they'll explain it later on.
Because they never said, like, all right, switch with Verstappen. Like,
No, they didn't tell him to switch, and I think they actually called team orders to keep position to help, maybe not help Perez, but like there's no need to fight
Mm-hmm.
right away. And then what's probably gonna happen? They're gonna have a discussion between the two drivers, saying like, "Hey, like if you guys want to fight, got to keep it clean, but we'll let you fight, and you guys can sort this out."
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that'll happen. I mean, well, for all we know, the next race and the rest of the season, Verstappen could dominate.
Because if they're not gonna be fighting Ferrari, and if Aston Martin's only gonna be getting like podiums, I guess, like
Mm-hmm.
still underneath Red Bull, then I would like to at least see a fight between the two Red Bull drivers, like,
Yeah.
and like not have Max dominate the entire season.
I don't think he will. It being because of that issue, whether or not he has to change his driving style or the car breaks on him.
If that keeps happening to him.
Mm-hmm. Because in order to change, he can't just hop into his same setup for the car and then change halfway through the race to like save the car. I mean, he can a little bit, but your setup is prioritized to how you drive. So if he wants to save the car, he has to have a setup set to that way.
Mm-hmm.
So if he, say that does happen and this is an issue and he has to change his driving style, he can't like halfway through the race, Perez gets ahead of him, then start doing what he normally does, which would help a little bit, but like he wouldn't be as fast as he could be in that driving style. So I think throughout the rest of the season, he's going to be at a slight disadvantage. But I still think he's faster outright. Yeah, there's a lot to say. Next I have Mercedes losing priority. Now, this isn't official yet, but it's widely talked about behind closed doors that, like I mentioned last time, if Aston Martin doesn't pick up the pace, Mercedes doesn't pick up the pace, Mercedes, the engine, like the people that make the engine, will start prioritizing giving the best engines and best components to Aston Martin because they're the faster Mercedes-powered team.
So of course, so like when Mercedes like sells their engines, I guess, to like Aston Martin and McLaren, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're not giving them pretty much the same engine that they have.
They have to give them the same engine.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how your contract is written, you can get new components like later or after this point or at whatever point.
Mm-hmm.
Some even teams in the past, this is a lot more common when teams used to be pretty small. They would have, I think the most recent example of this was in 2017, Sauber was using Ferrari engines from 2016.
Mm.
So instead of getting brand new engines, they got refurbished engines from the previous year. So it saves them a little bit of money because they were really tight for cash. No one has this contract now, but because they're all, at least say Aston Martin and Mercedes are like both kind of, Mercedes owns part of Aston Martin kind of anyway. Mm-hmm. So they kind of see them as a sister team. They don't have anything related with their cars specifically, but they see it as they're faster. We want the Mercedes brand to look good with our engines. So
we'll kind of support them.
We'll support them a little bit more because maybe they can catch Red Bull and maybe they can fight for the championship, but we're going to start helping them soon. And that's if Mercedes can't pick up the pace.
Mm.
So that's something we're going to have to look out for if that happens. I also have on other news, McLaren Honda. This has been talked about for some time now, but it looks like either McLaren will be powered by Ford engines after 2026, or McLaren takes over the contracts that Red Bull have with Honda currently that they still run Honda engines.
Mm.
And if Honda comes back, they're going to go with McLaren as an engine deal. But this is still kind of speculation. We don't know for sure yet. But that's
You think they'd be better off with the Honda engine rather than?
we'll see how the partnership goes. Well, when it first started in 2015, again, it was really miserable, but that's because they had a really bad engine. Now they have a good engine, and it's just a matter of
Can
making
McLaren
make it fit to their car.
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned my opinions on McLaren. I think they're just too not completely focused on Formula One solely, so it's kind of showing in their.
Because they're in what, IndyCar too?
They're an IndyCar, Formula
IndyCar?
E, huh?
Did they kind of dominate? No.
No, they're really good in IndyCar.
They're,
That's where Pato Ward is,
mm-hmm.
and he got second. He should have won, but that's another series. He should have won, but he pressed the. I don't know if he did or the car initiated, but he hit the pit limiter. So like on the straight, he's going slow as fuck for no reason, and he lost first place and finished second. I was so pissed off at that race, but
that's pretty funny.
That is funny, but like I'm like fuck.
Just
whatever.
What the fuck? Realize you're pressing the pit limit.
I think they race next week as well, or maybe in 2 weeks.
Mm-mm.
I know not this weekend though. And then our predictions for the next one.
Man, you can't even. I don't even want to say like Leclerc gets a podium or anything,
because
I know damn well.
I don't mean to be like make you more upset, but Australia was the first race that Red Bull won last year.
Didn't they win?
No, Ferrari won the first 2 races.
They did? I thought Leclerc won the first race and then Max won the second one. Oh.
Wait, hold on. Now I need to look it up.
2022 races all. Yeah, Leclerc won in Bahrain.
Oh no,
Max
Leclerc won in
Saudi.
Ferrari. Oh, okay, maybe they have a chance.
Leclerc won in Australia too.
And then you see Red Bull. No, look at this. This is the Wikipedia page. You got Ferrari. We still had hope here, and then
Red Bull.
Wow, fuck. But hey, maybe
Which race was it that Carlos's car fucking blew up?
That was
that they could have gone a 1-2 finish there, huh?
I think
because he was close to passing Verstappen, and then
don't make yourself more upset.
And I was like,
damn.
I was so depressed that day.
Hey, at least no, he won in the British Grand Prix. Hey, at least he won a race.
Not like to win, but at least to get the second place, like get a 1-2 finish there.
Yeah, but
was that Austria? I don't think.
Austria is where he.
Yeah, I think it was Austria. Because Leclerc won the race.
You got second here.
Belgium.
Why did Perez retire? Oh, I remember he was coming up from the field. I think it was Russell that hit him. Got a bunch of damage. That was last year anyway.
I remember last year everyone was on Russell for like always hitting someone.
We're talking about this year now.
I know. Like,
yeah. I think
predictions.
I'm predicting a Red Bull. That's pretty easy.
Me too.
I've never seen Perez actually be very good at Australia. I don't know why. Maybe he can be better, but I don't know.
I think Red Bull will win. If it's not Perez, then Verstappen. And
I think one of them's going to retire.
And then, like, the safest bet is to say, like, oh, Alonso will get third again or something.
I think it'll be close. Australia's never. They resurfaced the track, so like tire wear is going to be down anyway, so it's not as critical. It's a lot more fast turns. Actually, it's kind of a mix of everything. So, I'm gonna go. I think it just will be really close between Ferrari, Mercedes, and Aston Martin again. Maybe probably Alonso will come out on top, but I think it will be a lot harder if Leclerc's there. Is able to challenge him.
I'm gonna say something really bold.
Ferrari
Lance
won't retire.
Stroll, first place. No, okay. I think
that can happen. He was
Okay,
he was
it
doing he
can,
was
but,
fighting the
like-
Mercedes, then he
but, like,
retired.
you still have like Verstappen, Perez, Alonso in front of him.
For all we know, they crashed each other on like the first lap.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
You never know what's gonna happen. Like,
Okay, but I could see a Red Bull winning the race. Alonso either second or third, and in a perfect world, Leclerc is there on the podium with them.
we'll see. Even if Perez doesn't win, I really hope he's there on pace.
Mhm.
If that happens, and I know Australia's never been really good for him, then that tells me, okay, he is comfortable with this car. He can compete with Verstappen at any racetrack. Watch me say this, and he's going to be fucking behind by like
Don't-
15 seconds.
Don't listen to that side.
Yeah, but
Leclerc and Sainz 3 and 4.
I really hope that you're right, but you could also be really wrong.
I can't be very wrong. I want to see Sargent do better now though. Like after
Oh, I think Sargent will get his first points.
first points,
That's like a reasonable,
like 10th, 9th ish,
yeah.
like Albon type shit.
That's where he got his first points with Williams last year too.
Albon.
He pit on the last lap.
Oh, I think I saw that race with you and May.
That may have been the first race you watched.
Not really watch because I was doing my forensics. I had like an exam that day too, so I was like,
I know we watched that one in my room.
yeah, I was there.
So
And then you were like, "Is Albon pitting yet?" or something, and then like he finally did on the last lap. or
that was
something.
probably your first race then.
Yeah. Oh wow.
It's been 1 year. Congratulations. You're still depressed. That's been our review of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Perez for the win.
That was a good win.
Mhm.
He beat Verstappen. I'm happy. I'm
Yeah.
content.
I guess one more point. So I think this is another race where it's like all strategy and all like lap times.
Hmm.
This is another like type of F1 race that's like it's exciting not because they're fighting, but because we know, by we I mean me and my dad and my brother, that Perez has to keep him behind, and he's never been able to do that before. So it's really tense. Like we keep seeing the time coming down in the first couple laps, and like I'm getting worried, but then he keeps it there, and we keep wondering, even with 5 laps to go, Verstappen still has a chance. If say Perez like suddenly like makes a mistake, then he's 2 seconds or only 3 seconds behind. Then Verstappen finds space out of nowhere with 5 laps to go. He can make up that time, get in DRS, and then it's over.
Hmm.
So like even up to the end, like me and my dad, we weren't together. I talked about it with him later, but at least for myself, like I was still pretty like excited with like 2 laps to go, and I saw him going for the fastest lap. I'm like, okay, he's safe now. But I mean, that's what makes it exciting for me. And most people, I call it like the NASCAR effect, where people are so used to seeing cars side by side and crashing, where if they don't see that, if they don't see something crazy happening, it's considered boring. That's my take, but my name is Richard.
My name is Nathan.
This has been the Anything F1 podcast.
Toodaloo. I don't fucking know.
What the fuck? How does he say it?